3 years ago, my girlfriend's childhood sweetheart secretly substituted construction materials for the orphanage project, causing its collapse. With just one AI-synthesized video, my girlfriend became convinced that I, as a structural inspector, had engaged in professional misconduct. She forced me to kneel in the orphanage ruins for a live-streamed apology, resulting in my leg fracture, then had me imprisoned, enduring 3 bitter years behind bars. 3 years later, upon my release from prison, I discovered my girlfriend had already become engaged to her childhood sweetheart. Everyone expected me to cling desperately to her, but I neither wept nor protested, instead preparing an exquisite wedding gift for them. My life had been permanently stained because of them. How dare they build their happiness upon trampling me? After release, my first act was taking out my phone to book an international flight. The future I'd once planned with Wen Xinglan would never materialize. Better to vanish overseas and start anew. After securing the ticket, I took a deep breath and walked through the prison gates. Not far away, beside a car parked on the roadside, stood a familiar figure. Wen Xinglan leaned against the car door, staring at me expressionlessly. 3 years ago when the orphanage collapsed, she had looked at me with those same eyes. "Congratulations on your release, Gu Qingyan." A cheerful voice rang out as Song Chuyang rushed toward me holding an enormous bouquet. His expensive cashmere coat contrasted starkly with my worn-out clothes. The massive bouquet abruptly thrust itself into my face. Achoo! I stumbled back in panic as Song Chuyang conveniently released his grip. The bouquet fell to the ground, rolling twice before settling at my feet. "Song Chuyang kindly brought you flowers. What's your problem?" Wen Xinglan frowned as she approached. "It's fine. Gu Qingyan probably just needs time to adjust." Song Chuyang quickly intervened, bending down to retrieve the flowers. "Perhaps my preparations were inadequate and didn't meet Gu Qingyan's expectations. It's my fault." "This isn't your fault." Wen Xinglan hurriedly reached out to help Song Chuyang up. "Did you hear that, Gu Qingyan? Don't let Chuyang's kind intentions go to waste." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh, obediently bending down while enduring the discomfort in my nose. Picking up the bouquet. Wen Xinglan and I had shared 5 years of relationship. Now, after merely 3 years apart, she had already forgotten my pollen allergy. Seeing me retrieve the flowers, Wen Xinglan's expression finally softened. Supporting Song Chuyang, she gestured toward the car. "Get in." Song Chuyang naturally took the passenger seat. I paused momentarily before opening the rear door. "You'll stay at our place these few days. Move out once you find accommodation." Wen Xinglan spoke passively, "Don't disturb us. We're busy preparing for the wedding recently." This sentence pierced my heart like a sharp blade. "You're getting married?" I asked, feigning composure. "Yes, the wedding is next month." Song Chuyang answered with a smile. "Brother Gu should come help too. He's clumsy. Better not let him cause trouble later." Wen Xinglan gazed at Song Chuyang, endless tenderness in her eyes. Even knowing Wen Xinglan and I had no future, my heart still clenched with sharp pain. 3 years ago, as a building structural inspector, I co-founded a studio with Wen Xinglan, an architectural designer. We undertook the Government Welfare Center construction project, with Song Chuyang serving as the building materials supplier. But due to my negligence, substandard materials entered the construction site. On the day the Welfare Center officially opened, a magnitude 5 earthquake struck. The newly built structure collapsed completely, resulting in 1 fatality. Meanwhile, Song Chuyang righteously came forward and released surveillance footage showing me conspiring with others in the warehouse about material substitution and abusing power for personal gain. He wore a look of grim determination. Although they threatened me not to speak out, my conscience compelled me to do this. Overnight, I became a public enemy of the entire nation. Even though I repeatedly explained that I had not done such a thing, the enraged masses refused to spare me. Wen Xinglan was no exception. She forced me to kneel on the ruins for a full day and night, live streaming my public apology to the nation. At the time, I was running a high fever. After kneeling on the debris for 24 hours, my body gave out completely. My leg fractured from prolonged kneeling, and delayed recovery left me permanently crippled. When Wen Xinglan learned of this, she merely remarked coldly, "A demon like him should count himself lucky he didn't lose limbs." Afterward, Wen Xinglan and Song Chuyang sent me to prison, where I remained for 3 years. The car slowly pulled to a stop at a crossroads. I gazed out the window. A leisurely square lay beyond, where several children played and laughed. These voices gradually overlapped with the children's cries from 3 years ago, entwining around me like vines that rendered me immobile. To my surprise, Wen Xinglan and Song Chuyang's matrimonial home turned out to be the very house I had bought with Wen Xinglan years ago. However, everything I had previously arranged had vanished, replaced entirely by brand new furniture. After all, we're getting married. I tidied up the old things and threw away quite a lot. Song Chuyang said with a smile. "Sorry, Brother Gu. I'll compensate you later." "What compensation? Hasn't he caused you enough trouble back then?" When Xinglan frowned, glaring at me with disgust. Let's keep things separate. What happened back then is long over, Song Chuyang declared magnanimously. Though, Brother Gu, your room is already my room now. You'll have to make do with the guest room. In my own home, I was reduced to staying in the guest room. I looked towards Wen Xinglan. She met my gaze for barely a second before looking away. I let out a bitter laugh, nodded, and picked up my meager luggage to walk towards the room. That night, I lay on the bed staring blankly at the ceiling. Laughter and playful noises from Wen Xinglan and Song Chuyang's room next door grew increasingly loud, making it impossible to ignore. But my eyes could no longer shed tears. The sounds of their intimacy didn't cease until midnight, while I lay awake nearly till dawn. The next morning, I emerged from my room with dark circles under my eyes, immediately greeted by the sight of Song Chuyang with his collar hanging open, his neck covered in love bites. Brother Gu's awake? He casually adjusted his collar to better display the marks on his neck. I nodded, carefully avoiding eye contact with her. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Song Chuyang hurried forward to answer it. Son, I'm here to help you prepare for the wedding. Mother Song walked in with a smile, but her face fell the moment she saw me. Why is this trash still here? Mom, Gugu was released from prison and had nowhere to stay, so he's been living with us temporarily, Song Chuyang explained. How much did this good-for-nothing make our family company's stock drop last time? After all the work he caused you, how dare he have the nerve to live in your house? Mother Song snorted venomously. Just kick him out already. To be precise, this is a house that Wen Xinglan and I bought together. But since I've already decided to leave, I don't care about these material possessions I can't take with me, so I didn't argue further. I just lowered my head and hid my gaze, trying not to provoke Mother Song. Cat got your tongue? Mother Song grew angrier when I stayed silent, charging toward me in a few quick steps. I heard you're my son's fiancé's ex-boyfriend? How shameless are you to live in a newlywed couple's home? Are you even a man? As she spoke, Mother Song reached out to slap me. I was shocked and instinctively turned my head to dodge her palm. But Mother Song wasn't so fortunate. She hadn't expected me to evade, and momentum sent her crashing to the floor with a loud crash. Mom, are you okay? Song Chuyang cried in panic, lunging forward. The noise startled Wen Xinglan in the bedroom. She walked out frowning, just in time to witness the scene. What's going on here? Look at this good-for-nothing. Mother Song, badly shaken from the fall, sat on the floor trembling as she pointed at me. Look what he's done. Gu Qingyan, what schemes are you pulling now? Wen Xinglan glared at me viciously, yes, brimming with disappointment. I thought 3 years in prison might have changed you, but you're still the same wretched man. I wanted to explain myself, but when I met Wen Xinglan's gaze, the words died in my throat. If that's what you think, then so be it. I said flatly. You. Wen Xinglan was so furious that she suddenly rushed forward and slapped me. That's Song Chuyang's mother. Is this how you treat an elder? The force of Wen Xinglan's slap was tremendous. The moment her palm struck, I felt an enormous impact on my face, and my entire body was thrown uncontrollably backward. A searing pain belatedly surged through my face. When I raised my hand to gently touch the spot, the agony left me speechless. Sorry, Brother Gu. Could I ask you to step out for a moment? Song Chuyang said after helping his mother up, squatting beside me. Mother and I need to prepare wedding supplies today. It seems you two shouldn't be around each other right now. When the pain subsided slightly, I said nothing more. Picking up my phone from the side, I walked out of the room without looking back. That's quite a beating you took. Do you want to report it to the police? The nurse asked worriedly as she treated my wound. I forced a smile and shook my head. Once the treatment was done, I thanked the nurse and left the hospital. My phone chimed with a notification. It was unmistakably from Wen Xinglan. I lost my temper earlier and didn't control my strength. Sorry. Take this money and get yourself something. Along with it came a notification confirming the transfer had been received. I let out a bitter laugh, tucked my phone away, and walked into a nearby fruit shop to pick out a few baskets. With nowhere else to go, I figured I might as well visit my parents. Stepping out of the taxi, I stared blankly at the sign reading Xinshan Cemetery in the distance. My parents had passed away years ago, one after the other, due to illness. Between setting up my studio and the sudden accident that landed me in prison, I'd been either too busy or simply unable to come. Counting the times I'd visited since their deaths, it amounted to barely a handful. I gently placed the fruit baskets before their graves. Their photos showed the same kindly smiles they'd worn in life. Dad, Mom. My fingertips brushed against the cold tombstone, and my throat tightened momentarily. Sorry, I've let you down. If I'd been more cautious back then. The small tree beside the tombstone rustled in the wind, scattering leaves onto me. I rambled on about my prison experiences over the past 3 years, even knowing I'd get no response. Better to voice it than bury it forever. Under the sunlight, the tombstone cast a long shadow resembling an unfillable fissure. It wasn't until sunset that I finally stopped speaking. Rubbing my numb legs, I staggered to my Faye. E.T. Dad? Mom? I have to go now, I whispered. There are still sins I need to atone for. After leaving my parents' grave, I walked straight into the depths of the cemetery. Passing countless tombstones, I finally stopped before one particular grave. Dried offerings lay before this tombstone, evidence of frequent visitors paying respects. I placed the fruit basket before the tombstone and bowed deeply. This was the sole victim who died in that orphanage collapse case. She was a teacher at the orphanage, who sacrificed her life to protect the children. I knelt before her grave, meticulously wiping the dust off the tombstone with my hands. A sudden whooshing sound came from behind me. I ducked sharply, narrowly dodging a clod of dirt. The dirt clod shattered against the tombstone, sending up a cloud of dust. When I turned to look, I locked eyes with a young man. You murderer! How dare you show your face here? The youth roared furiously, charging straight at me. How dare you face my mother? He violently grabbed my collar and shoved me backward. Your punishment was too light. Go dot. His foot slammed into my stomach. With a pained grunt, I staggered back several steps. My footing gave way, and sudden weightlessness engulfed me. When I tumbled down the stairs, I barely managed to protect my head. Though largely unharmed, my body still throbbed too much to move. From the corner of my eye, I saw the young man grab something and stride toward me. Enough. Keep this up, and you'll end up in jail. A furious shout rang out. My eyes snapped open when Xinglan. She blocked his path, intercepting the young man's motion. The boy glared at her hatefully, spat on my face, then stomped away resentfully. Instead of tending to yourself, you came here to court suffering. How impressive. Now that the boy had left, when Xinglan turned and looked down at me from her height. Not your concern, I muttered flatly, struggling to rise from the floor. When Xinglan stared at me fixedly, her flickering gaze indecipherable. Enough. Suddenly, she seized my arm. Going home. The car ride home passed in total silence. When we returned home, Mrs. Song had already left. Song Chuyang cheered and hugged Wen Xinglan, casting a slightly odd look at me. How come you came back together? Song Chuyang asked. I went to the cemetery and happened to run into him. So I brought him back, Wen Xinglan replied. The cemetery? Why did you go there? The orphanage project is going to be restarted. The bidding conference is in a week, so I visited the victims' families. Wen Xinglan paused before answering. Hearing this, my hand paused on the door handle. As the bidding conference approached, Wen Xinglan became increasingly busy. Song Chuyang was also occupied with wedding preparations and didn't spend much time at home. Aside from dumping all the household chores on me, he didn't do much else. Being alone at home, I also had more time to prepare for going abroad. The day before the bidding conference, while cleaning, I found the bidding documents Wen Xinglan had left on the coffee table. After a moment's hesitation, I still returned it to her room. After putting down the bidding documents, I turned to leave but encountered Wen Xinglan, who pushed the door open. What are you doing in my room? She frowned, seeming somewhat angry. Your bidding documents were left on the table. I put them there for you. I told her truthfully. Perhaps recalling she had indeed forgotten the documents outside, she said nothing more. After a pause, she changed the subject. Our wedding with Song Chuyang is in 2 weeks. Will you come? I almost instinctively shook my head. Better not. It's bad luck for me to attend. Besides, my flight is scheduled within these few days. Wen Xinglan seemed unprepared for my response, freezing in place. Seeing this, I stepped past her. May you and Song Chuyang share a harmonious century together, growing old side by side. After all, we wouldn't meet again. The day of the bidding conference soon arrived. Wen Xinglan and Song Chuyang left early in the morning. Alone at home, I finished cleaning and stayed in my room packing luggage. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the entrance. Before I could react to what was happening, the door burst open with a bang. Wen Xinglan had kicked it open, standing furiously outside. Before I could say anything, she rushed forward and grabbed my throat. What else do you want to do? She ground out through clenched teeth. The rival company's bidding documents are nearly identical to ours except for punctuation marks. What exactly are you trying to achieve? Struggling to breathe, I staggered against the wall for support. What are you? Who else could have touched my bidding documents besides you? When Xinglan's grip on my neck tightened increasingly, her rationality all but vanished. Do you have any idea how much effort we've put into this bidding conference? Oxygen was gradually forced out of my chest cavity. I could only claw helplessly at Wen Xinglan's arm as my vision began to blur. Brother Gu, if you needed money, you could have told us. Why destroy all our hard work like this? In the haze, Song Chuyang's voice pierced through with unusual clarity. He leaned against the doorframe, a triumphant smile curling at his lips. It's not me. I forced out broken syllables through strained breaths. When Xinglan suddenly released her grip, sending me collapsing limply to the floor as I erupted into violent coughs. It seems you truly never learn your lesson. When Xinglan turned and called in 2 bodyguards. They grabbed my arms from both sides and began dragging me out. Let's see how long your stubbornness can last. She had the two bodyguards drag me all the way before throwing me into the basement storage room beneath the chamber. This storage space was only connected to the main room by a long staircase, serving no purpose beyond storing miscellaneous items. They threw me inside, and when Xinglan locked the door from the outside, "You can come out after I clean up this mess." In the dim basement, it was nearly impossible to keep track of time. After who knows how long I'd been trapped there, the door finally opened. I looked up and found Song Chuyang standing there. "Why are you here?" I asked in a hoarse voice. "To see if you're dead yet," Song Chuyang snarled, shedding his usual gentleness. "You're truly pathetic, taking the blame for something you didn't do. So it was you after all. What are you trying to achieve?" I raised my eyes, locking gazes with Song Chuyang. "Achieve? To ensure you'll never appear before Wen Xinglan again, of course." Song Chuyang sneered. "I specifically tipped off the victim's family about your whereabouts at the cemetery, meant to eliminate you in one strike. Yet you've got 9 lives, somehow surviving with Wen Xinglan's rescue. Seeing that Wen Xinglan was actually willing to save you, of course I felt uneasy. After much thought, framing you one more time seemed more reliable." "Again?" I repeated. "All right, you didn't know yet." Song Chuyang burst into laughter. "The video where I accused you is AI generated. I was the one who swapped the construction materials back then." My eyes widened abruptly. As the construction material supplier, Song Chuyang had ample opportunity to tamper with them. "You'll face karma for acting with such reckless disregard for human life," I shouted furiously. "No matter. You've already been my scapegoat, and even if you expose this, no one will believe you." Song Chuyang stood up, smirking. "Whatever. A corpse can't speak anyway." He pulled out a match, lit it, and tossed it onto a pile of debris nearby. "I'll find you a nicer tombstone." With that, he strode out and locked the door behind him. The basement, filled with clutter, allowed flames to rapidly spread. Scorching air seared my throat, yet my will to survive burned fiercer than ever. I would never let these flames become the end of my life. I grabbed a nearby iron rod and pried open the basement vent with all my strength, crawling out of the basement just before suffocation claimed me. The moment I breathed fresh air, I actually felt the joy of rebirth. I withdrew all the money from my card, discarded my phone, and left this place without looking back. Wen Xinglan, we're never meeting again. Wen Xinglan spent 3 full days resolving the plagiarism incident with the proposal. These 3 days saw her constantly on the move, sleeping in TH's studio every night without even returning home once. She massaged her temples and turned on her phone that had remained unused for 3 days. To her surprise, there wasn't a single message from Gu Qingyan on the device. After much hesitation, she still dialed his number. The busy tone persisted endlessly until Wen Xinglan grew irritated, yet nobody answered. She abruptly hung up, an inexplicable unease settling in her heart. "Xinglan, I heard you're done. I came to see you." Song Chuyang pushed the door open briskly and announced cheerfully. "Why are you here?" Seeing Song Chuyang's arrival, Wen Xinglan suppressed her unease and smiled. "Of course I'm worried about you. 3 whole days, shouldn't you rest properly?" Song Chuyang pulled Wen Xinglan into a hug and laughed. Hearing this, Wen Xinglan suddenly realized Gu Qingyan had also been locked in the basement for 3 days. "By the way, how has Gu Qingyan been these days?" Wen Xinglan asked. I wouldn't know." Song Chuyang put on an innocent expression. "I've been staying with my mother these days while preparing for the wedding." He had long blocked the property management's number on Wen Xinglan's phone. Even if they noticed something wrong and called these days, it wouldn't get through. By the time Wen Xinglan returns home, Gu Qingyan will already have been burned to ashes. Hearing Song Chuyang's words, the sense of foreboding in Wen Xinglan's heart grew stronger. She pushed Song Chuyang away and stood up. "I'm going home first." "Going home now? But I just reserved a table at a restaurant." Seeing this, Song Chuyang quickly grabbed Wen Xinglan's arm. "I've been wanting to eat at that place for so long. Come with me, okay?" Noticing Wen Xinglan's hesitation, Song Chuyang unceremoniously dragged her toward the elevator. By the time they returned home, it was already 11 p.m. As they entered the residential complex, a property staff member rushed over. "Miss Wen, we couldn't reach your phone. I was worried sick." "What's wrong?" Seeing the staff's anxiety, Wen Xinglan's unease finally peaked. "There was a fire at your house." The staff explained. Fortunately, it was the basement and didn't spread to living areas. Since no one was home, we didn't intervene extensively, waiting for your return to assess. Bang! Wen Xinglan felt her mind go completely blank in an instant, not even registering what the person before her was saying. She frantically threw down everything in her hands and sprinted toward home. Gu Qingyan was still locked in the basement. The moment she pushed open the door, the acrid smell of burning filled the room, stinging her nose and making her eyes water. She dashed towards the basement, But when she saw the intact iron door, her hope was instantly extinguished. With trembling hands, she opened the door. The basement lay completely ravaged by fire, nearly everything reduced to ash, with only scattered fragments remaining amidst the ruins. Miss Wen, since the fire wasn't very large and we couldn't reach you by phone, we didn't feel it was appropriate to break in. We had to block the ventilation vents first and only reopen them after waiting for the fire to die down. The belatedly arriving steward, noticing Wen Xinglan's pale complexion, carefully ventured. Let me see the surveillance footage. When Xinglan felt her blood run cold, yet she grew strangely calm, her voice steady and low. There were no ignition sources in the basement, in this perpetually damp and chilly space. How could it have spontaneously combusted? While the surveillance cameras didn't cover the basement visually, their extensive audio pickup range clearly captured voices from within. When Xinglan stared at the monitor, searching for any telltale clues. Front door footage showed Song Chuyang entering briefly before his voice was recorded by the rear door camera. I was the one who swapped the construction materials back then. After all, corpses can't talk. Song Chuyang's crisp declaration transformed into a sledgehammer that smashed through Wen Xinglan's heart. She never imagined the incident 3 years ago concealed such horrifying truth. She'd originally chosen Song Chuyang's family as construction material suppliers simply because of their childhood acquaintance, believing familiar contacts ensured smoother collaboration. Never did she expect this decision would become the death warrant for Gu Qingyan. Song Chuyang never expected Wen Xinglan to investigate the surveillance, nor did he anticipate the camera's audio coverage being so extensive. Panicked, he immediately turned to flee. To his surprise, Wen Xinglan moved faster than him. With lightning reflexes, she signaled her bodyguard to intercept Song Chuyang, who grabbed his collar. Wen Xinglan rushed forward and slapped Song Chuyang. What the hell did you do? I didn't do anything. Song Chuyang stammered. I really didn't do anything. Then how did this fire start? Wen Xinglan roared. At that moment, Wen Xinglan's phone rang again. She hastily answered, only to find it was her assistant calling. President Wen, I've just discovered something. The assistant sounded perplexed. I previously backed up the bidding documents on the cloud drive. When I logged in to check earlier, I found someone accessed the cloud 4 days ago and modified the bidding documents. When Xinglan froze, they had only started using cloud backups in the past 2 years. Gu Qingyan couldn't possibly have known how to access the cloud, and the login IP belongs to Songsher Building Materials Limited Group. Hearing this, when Xinglan felt her entire body turn cold. Who could have imagined that the one who leaked the bidding documents in the end was her own partner lying beside her? Why? She gripped Song Chuyang's neck, tightening her grip bit by bit, and said coldly, why did you leak the bidding documents? Why frame Gu Qingyan? Why? Because you're still hung up on him. With everything exposed, Song Chuyang finally dropped the act. We're the ones who are meant to be together. What right do you have to be with him? Song Chuyang's expression twisted into something vicious and terrifying. For a moment, even when Xinglan was stunned. Have you lost your mind? Every incident from the past formed a heavy shackle, constricting her heart until it nearly burst. That's right, I am crazy. My madness lies in loving you. Song Chuyang roared. The property management staff nearby had already alerted the police upon sensing trouble. Now, the approaching sirens of police cars echoed outside the door. Save those words for the police. When Xinglan abruptly released her grip, and the bodyguards shoved Song Chuyang onto a nearby chair. Police officers filed in and escorted away the violently struggling Song Chuyang. In addition to the arson case, when Xinglan submitted all the recordings and the original video evidence, which she had painstakingly recovered, of Song Chuyang using AI deepfake technology to frame Gu Qingyan years ago to the authorities for investigation. She also uploaded the entire truth of the matter online. Only then did the public realize they had wrongfully accused an innocent person for years. Families of the victims from the welfare center tragedy led a protest surrounding the Song family's villa, demanding severe punishment for Song Chuyang. The Song family's construction materials company also plummeted. More and more partners who had collaborated with the Song family began exposing issues with the materials they supplied. Overwhelming news coverage left the Song family virtually housebound, trembling in fear within their home. When Xinglan paid no mind to the Song's current plight. Nowadays, she visited the cemetery once daily. Due to the excessive flammable materials, Gu Qingyan's remains had become completely unrecoverable. She could only purchase an adjacent plot in the cemetery where Gu Qingyan's parents rested, creating a memorial grave for him containing personal belongings. Every day, she brought 2 bouquets, one placed before Gu Qingyan's parents' tombstone, the other at his memorial grave. Kneeling before Gu Qingyan's grave, she confessed all her past wrongdoings. Gu, can you handle this report? I cheerfully accepted my colleague's request and turned back to my work. After going abroad, Although it was indeed difficult at first, I hadn't wallowed in self-pity during my time in prison and had continued studying architectural subjects. Therefore, after going overseas, while working various jobs, I studied diligently and eventually was admitted to a prestigious architecture school. Oof, I now knew the truth about the accident years ago. I still kept wondering. If I had been more careful, more thorough, might this tragedy have been avoided? Driven by this thought, I eventually graduated successfully and joined a studio recommended by my mentor, becoming a building structure inspector again. Over the years, I've participated in countless construction projects and gradually became a leading figure in the industry. By the way, there's a foreign assignment next week, your home country. A colleague handed me documents. You haven't been back for years, have you? Want to go visit? Thinking about how I hadn't visited my parents' graves for many years, I hesitated momentarily before finally agreeing. The project timeline was extremely tight. By the time we fully completed it, there were less than 12 hours left before the flight to our next destination would depart. I had no time to rest, rushing to the cemetery without stopping. Dad, Mom, I'm here. Unlike my disheveled appearance during my last visit, I now stood well-dressed in a suit, looking sharp and capable. Placing the fruit basket in front of my parents' graves, I murmured softly, "Don't worry, I'm doing well now. I have a job I love, my own place to live, and a stable life." I kept chattering away, completely unaware of the approaching footsteps behind me. Gu Qingyan. A familiar voice suddenly rang out behind me. I stood up and turned around. It was Wen Xinglan. Her eyes were red and her face looked exhausted, as if she hadn't rested properly for a long time. She clutched 2 chrysanthemum bouquets in her hands, the stems slightly deformed from the force of her grip. She staggered 2 steps forward, staring at me disbelievingly. "Gu Qingyan, you're alive?" I calmly retreated 2 steps, nodding distantly at her. "Long time no see, Miss Wen." "Gu Qingyan, I've come here every day these past few years." She raised the flowers in her hand, gazing at me eagerly. "All these years, I've never forgotten you." I turned my face away, replying awkwardly, "Miss Wen, apologies, I'm allergic to pollen." When Xinglan's body stiffened violently, she hurriedly threw the flowers aside. Sorry, I forgot about that." As if trying to make amends, she frantically pulled out her phone to show me something. "Look, Gu Qingyan, Song Chuyang has been sentenced to life imprisonment, and his family's business has collapsed completely. He'll never harm anyone again." "Apologies, Miss Wen. I'm in a hurry." I interrupted her confession and said calmly, "Moreover, there's no entanglement between us now." "I know." When Xinglan grabbed my hand and spoke urgently, "The studio we founded has been renamed under your identity, and we've established a foundation in your name. All these years I've been atoning. So, I was wondering if we could. Thank you for everything you've done. Miss Wen, I'll transfer some funds later for you to donate to the foundation." I pried open her fingers one by one from my hand. With each movement, the hope in Wen Xinglan's eyes gradually dimmed. "I'm sorry, Gu Qingyan, can we really never start over?" she asked in a low voice. Wen Xinglan. I called her name for the last time, suddenly realizing this name no longer stirred the slightest ripple in my heart. "I really am in a hurry. I need to attend an international conference about the construction of children's welfare homes." She stared blankly at me, unable to utter another word. I turned and walked out of the cemetery, never looking back. A distant car horn sounded, startling a flock of white pigeons into flight, my colleague urging me to hurry for the flight. I looked up at the soaring white doves, the last vestiges of gloom in my heart dissipating completely. Behind me came a low whimper, like the child I'd lost long ago, crushed into the evening mountain breeze as it flew toward the horizon.